What's up? Jeremy Adams here, and today's a very exciting day. It's my first ever episode of my new podcast, Openly Outspoken. And the reason I named it Openly Outspoken is because, over the last few years, especially the last few months with everything going on in this world, I feel like we're taking steps back as society. It's so important for us to have, our own opinions and our own thoughts and be able to have conversations and be able to disagree, be able to learn from one another, even if you don't agree with that person at all. It's so important to just hear the other side, have conversation. And I think that's a lost art in society today, or at least for a lot of people. And it's what I've seen a lot. And I've thought of launching a podcast for many years now, but the timing just never felt right to me. And now it does. And so my first episode is with a great friend of mine. For those that don't know, I'm on the board of a couple of nonprofits in the Central Florida area. One of them is Goodwill. They're a pretty large organization, and the CEO of Goodwill, his name's Ed Durkee, a great guy, and we get in lots of conversations about helping people and the Goodwill organization, and in particular lately we've talked quite extensively about COVID and did the USA handle it properly? How should we have handled it better? And COVID in particular is a very controversial topic now. Should people be wearing masks? All these things. And there's just so much hate. And it just really disappoints me that communication regarding that topic and so many others that I'm going to be covering on my podcast here in the future just aren't handled better. So we had a great conversation. Again, he's a great dude. Every time we chat, I feel like I learn a lot, and I hope you enjoy my first episode. And by the way, one final thought: if there's anything that you agree in my episodes with me on, let me know. If there's anything that you disagree on, let me know. I think conversation and being brave enough to share your own opinions on things is so important, and it's something that is great about the world, but especially the United States. We have freedom of speech, and we should empower people to share their voice and be heard and have dialogue, because that's how solutions happen, right? So again, thanks for listening to my first episode, and enjoy the show.
This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
All right, Ed, we're live. Welcome. Episode number 1, man. And we were actually just talking about the H on my shirt for people watching on video. I'm on the board of Goodwill of Central Florida. That's how we know each other. And then I'm on the board of a company called Hope Now International. They're also based in Central Florida, and they supply kids with free backpacks, school supplies, haircuts, vision screenings, dental screenings every year, all free of charge. And it's all with private money, all privately managed, and it's a really great organization. So, but anywho, you just got back from driving all the way across country, which is insane to me. So can we talk about that? First of all, why the heck?
I'm just glad to see that you're still alive, Jeremy.
Yeah, can we talk about why
after your risky behaviors?
Well, we need to do some cost benefit analysis here. Driving cross country, what was that, 25 hours each way?
41 hours each way.
Okay, I was
Don't
way
diminish
undercut.
my accomplishment here.
So 80 hours of total driving.
Yep.
Compared to the likelihood of any type of damage with COVID-19 in that air, I feel like there's some sort of equivalent there, right?
Well, I was thinking that I wish I had a friend who was an actuary, because we could have seen, who's more likely to be harmed here? You by COVID because you flew in a tube full of Floridians, or me because I drove 41 hours on crowded interstates and passed approximately 2,000 trucks. So who took the bigger risk, right?
The trucks you're passing, and just who knows, tires blow out, just stuff happens. So When you drove to California, I mean, that was just your reasoning at this point. You just didn't feel comfortable with the virus, and you just thought it would be a better bet for you to drive to see your family because your family's out there.
Yeah, exactly. This wasn't just to go to the beach.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started this job on January 1st, as you know. We hadn't even been here 60 days when the pandemic broke out. Fortunately, I was in California the last week of February to see my family. My wife, as you know, my wife is going to be out, is moving to Florida permanently to be with me in September after our son goes to school in college in the fall. So anyway, I left in February and hadn't gotten to see them for 4 months. And I got to the point where I simply had to see my family, and I was left with the choice, get on a metal tube, full of Floridians and fly for 6 hours, or pack up the car and drive for 41 hours over 4 days. And I chose to drive.
That's commitment. That's what I told you via text. I'm like, I'm never going to doubt your commitment now. So what was funny is, like, I was flying in the air right before I flew to San Diego, and you're like, let me know if you're still alive. Well, in
2 weeks, right? I had a 2-week clock, and we were checking in regularly.
Yeah. Now, I still got to get my antibody test. I would say, like, if I was a betting man, I would say I've had it, but we'll see. I'm gonna get it in the next few weeks. I just gotta, like, actually, because I got rid of I had a Tesla, and I got rid of it because I never drove, so now I have to, like, take an Uber to get an antibody test. So a topic that we discuss a lot, and there's a lot of stuff with Goodwill I want to chat about, because there's a lot of great things that Goodwill does and a lot of false assumptions that are made about Goodwill that I want to address with you and chat with you. But something we've talked about for hours at this point is our theories on the best way to handle COVID-19, right? And my theory is we should have drew a line in the sand, vulnerable population, non-vulnerable population, and kept everything open, kept schools open, kept businesses open, reduced federal spending output, and just let the healthy population live their lives with something in place to protect the vulnerable population. And I'm not a medical expert, I'll admit, but whatever that line in the sand is, if it's, people that are currently on Social Security income, that it's kind of easy for them to kind of stay home, if it's maybe a little bit younger and there's some sort of government funding, but just something to keep everything moving. And just, I think what's happening with the lockdowns currently is, obviously, if we were a lot stricter, there would be less COVID death, right? I will agree with you on that. If we were super, super strict, there would be, without a doubt, less people would have died of COVID. I'm not going to deny that. And less people would have gotten it, would have spread it.
Right.
But you
can't stop the world forever, right?
Correct. And I don't think we're really tracking the, and I'm not saying it's comparable, but I think all of this could be rather comparable. The suicide rate increased, the domestic abuse increased, the drug and alcohol abuse increased, the social isolation that so many people, including myself, and by the way, I think a lot of our policies come, at least in my case, part of my policy belief may be because, I'm a single guy that stayed in my apartment by myself for a really long time, and my mindset, and again, I'm not saying this, is 100% going into my policy decision, but for me personally, I would rather take a risk on getting a virus than feel extended links of social isolation that I did, and I'm not saying there weren't a lot of positives that came from it for me. There were. I got really healthy in a lot of ways. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of good things, but I am for some sort of modified herd immunity approach. You're not at all. So let's I share with everybody your approach if you were in charge.
Sure. So, ways to go about it, right? the and recognizing that the bit that hindsight is 2020. You look at some of the different approaches that have been taken around the world. Let's take a look at 3 approaches, and let's just kind of focus on the industrialized world here, and really the industrialized democracies. So Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, us, Canada, right? Those countries. I consider those to be our peer countries. So let's look at our peers, right? So, all of our peers, for the most part, are reopening. Right, and they're getting ready to go back, and resume their daily activities. They're sending their kids to school. They're going to restaurants. They're going about their business. Pretty much everything except for live sporting events and going to the theater. And we're not. And so, what are the approaches here? So, one, the approach that worked was you shut everything down. A couple countries truly did lockdowns. We never really locked down. We had stay-at-home orders, but you could leave if you wanted to, and lots of the economy was still functioning, all the essential services and all that. But like Spain and Italy, they really locked down. You had to stay home, and they shut down everything. No traffic there for months. But what they also did, with the lockdown orders, that slowed down the transmission of the virus, and then they did testing and tracing. Right? They did. Lots and lots of testing. If people got it, then they really aggressively, got in touch with everybody they had been in contact with, for a week or two prior to that. They tested all of those folks. And if people would, come up with a virus, they would isolate them, prevent them from transmitting it to everyone else. And they really drove the transmission of the virus basically down to zero. There hasn't been any transmission of the virus in New Zealand in weeks. In Australia, they're down to a couple hundred cases a day. In Germany, the same thing, and on and on. And there's a couple of them. If you look at Spain, Italy, and France, they had some really nasty outbreaks, of the virus there. But they were able, through lockdowns, to slow down the transmission of the virus. Through testing, they were able to find where the virus was actually being transmitted and who had it. They would isolate those folks. And really suppress the virus down to zero. As a result, they're all getting their freedom back. They did have to endure the economic hardship of having to shut down their economies for a couple of months. But then you can contrast that with what we did. We shut down our economy, not as aggressively as they did, but we shut down our economy a lot. I can tell you about the impacts that's had on Goodwill. But then we didn't do that, and we slowed down the transmission of the virus, so we protected the healthcare system. The healthcare system, with the exception of New York, didn't get overwhelmed. But we didn't do the next step of testing and tracing to eliminate the transmission of the virus. So the transmission of the virus in the United States never got down never got below the 20,000 new cases per day. So as soon as we opened up, the virus began to, people began to get infected again. So we got all the pain, all the economic pain of the stay-at-home orders and shutting down the economy, with none of the benefit of getting our freedom back, because we skipped the most important step, of the test, trace, and isolate to really stop it. So we slowed it down at enormous expense, trillions of dollars of public expenditures, trillions of dollars, what I'm certain will be trillions of dollars in losses to the private economy. But because we didn't use the levers of public health, test, trace, and isolate, we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole with the virus for another year or so until the vaccine comes. And it's really a missed opportunity. You look at the video of what's going on. People are back in the cafes, and they're resuming their lives, going to work and sending their kids to school. And we're not going to be doing that because we didn't have discipline in the approach of truly. We slowed it down, but we didn't stop it.
Yeah, so, and I think where we're at now, and I think we both can agree, even though we have kind of alternate theories, we're kind of in the middle now. And that's where we've been, is really in the middle, to your point. And, that's the worst place to be. Because at least with my strategy, the economy wouldn't have taken a hit.
Right?
With your
economy, but we're not getting our freedom back.
Correct. The middle is the worst place to be. It's like either, even though I don't necessarily, agree with the route you're talking about, I would say, looking back at it, either of the routes would have probably been a better solution than where we are now, which is which is somewhat in the middle. Something that you mentioned, and I know different countries have different rules about this. When you say isolate, I know, like, I don't see the U.S. ever being able to, like, require somebody to stay at a hospital if they had tested positive. I know in some countries that's what they were doing. They're requiring people to test in hospitals. Do you think that's something reasonable to expect for like a country like ours?
Sure. Mandating it and making it so that we're not going to do like China did, right? China was going in, China, realized that the family was the vector of transmission, right? So if one person in a family got it, then the authorities would show up and separate everybody in the household, sometimes forcibly. Of course, we're not going to do that, but we didn't even give people an option of having a place to go.
Yeah.
I have a very good friend back in Santa Cruz who got it, and what they told her, and she had, what they told her was stay home unless you feel you can't breathe. And if you can't breathe, then come here and we'll intubate you. But we won't send you to the hospital. So she didn't even have a choice. So it's not the issue of whether or not you're going to be forcibly, requiring people to go someplace they don't want to go and receive treatment. We didn't even have it available as an option. We didn't even set up infirmaries where people could go and isolate themselves from the rest of the population on a voluntary basis. We just told people to stay home.
Yeah. So where would, especially with the case number we have, like, where would a lot of these people go? Like, are you still proposing, like today, and we're recording this episode on July 21st, 2020. So today, is it still reasonable to do the isolate and track method that you're talking about with how many cases, or are we too far past that?
Well, we've made it enormously more difficult. And at this point, we kind of get beyond my expertise on this. I'm just a guy who follows the news. But unless we want to live like this, for the next year, we'll have to do that. This is the difference between what we did and what Sweden did, right? Sweden famously did not lock down. Although they did, and I know you and I watched that same video over the last day or so from the Swedish government that described their strategy. They weren't totally open, but they didn't do anything nearly like what Italy and Spain did. They stayed primarily open, but they also did really aggressive test, trace, and isolate. Right?
Yeah.
So they chose kind of a middle path, but a path that was that had a credible path to an outcome that suppressed the transmission of the virus and allows them to reopen their economy. So now you look at their deaths have come down a lot, but because they chose the path they did, they had 10 times the deaths of their neighboring Nordic states, and 5 times the deaths of Denmark. They're the largest of the neighboring. So they had a death rate between 5 and 10 times. To me, 10 times a death rate 10 times larger than it needs to be, is unacceptable. However, it's not that they did nothing. They did the test, trace, and isolate, and as a result, they have suppressed the virus to near zero. We chose, as you said, the middle way. We chose to, inflict all the economic damage with stay-at-home orders and close to a lockdown, without getting the benefit of truly stopping the transmission of the virus. And so now we're just going to, as a nation, we're going to have this somewhere to low to high grade fever until a vaccine comes around. And I guess here's a point that you and I discuss a lot is like, my opinion is that you can't really have economic health without public health. I think that as the virus continues to infect people out of control in Florida, that's going to have an impact on our economy. So in addition to all the pain that we had in March, April, and May, we're going to have a very slow economy for a year when we could have just had all the pain that we had in April, May, and June.
Yeah, and I do agree with some, like what Sweden did. Like, I'm not super extreme where I'm like, let's not do anything, let's open up willy nilly. It's like, do something to protect that vulnerable population. And like restaurants in Central Florida now are doing temperature checks when you walk in. There's just like very reasonable stuff. It's just like, okay, a temperature check to walk in, that seems
Sure.
reasonable. If it's a better system, obviously we could have had a lot better system for isolating and tracing and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I think a
And we
lot of
just didn't
those
do those things.
Yeah. Do you feel that, and I'm curious to your thoughts on like what schools should do as well, but do you think that one of the pros of having a society, like obviously there's a lot of pros of having a society like America does. We're very we're very entrepreneurial, very patriotic, hardworking group. But I think when it comes to government direction, people are just a little weary of like trusting government. And I'm just wondering, it's just like, do you think it could have been, like, I definitely think it could have been better with better leadership and direction in either way, right? Again, even if it was your route, I wouldn't have agreed and supported it, but it would have been better than in the middle. Like, do you think America is just kind of a pain in the ass when it comes to things like this? Like, do you think it couldn't have been as good as like Australia or New Zealand or some of these Nordic countries because of just, I mean, there's so many conspiracy theories on social I see every day. I don't know if America would have completely bought into it, Maybe not, but I just feel like,
Well, we have in the past. The United States has had excellent public health responses and a public that was willing to go along with clear direction in ways that keeps them safe. We've done that in the past. I mean, you look at 1918. I mean, like, my Twitter feed is full of pictures from 1918 of people wearing masks, right? People did what it took, to stop the transmission of this virus. You can look at the sacrifices that people made in World War II. I think we're more than capable as a nation of shared sacrifice that's necessary to allow us to be a healthy, prosperous society. So yes, I do. You need to have public leadership. When we haven't had that, right? So we didn't do the test, trace, and isolate. We didn't use all the technology, and by the technology here, I'm talking about the protocols of public health, test, trace, and isolate, which were developed in the United States, by the way. The rest of the world used to very great effect. I think if we had good leadership, that was describing to people the benefits of doing this, and was working in concert with the rest of the world, I think we would have been just fine.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't have that kind of leadership, and and perhaps you could take the question back one step. It's like if we had wanted that kind of leadership, maybe we'd have it, right?
Potentially. Do you feel like if you had young kids right now, would you feel comfortable sending them back to school?
Boy, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It's so hard to know what to do now because we have just blown the response, right? You and I have talked about this. It's like, when we closed the Goodwill stores back on March 25th, by the way, and I went back and looked at the day we closed down on March 25th. And I had thought that the shutdown of the stores was going to last for 3 to 4 months because, I was reading all the epidemiologists and the public health experts, and they said it's going to take, 2 or 3 months to slow down the transmission of the virus, to implement the testing and tracing, and within 3 to 4 months we should have it totally stopped, and then we can reopen. So I calibrated all of our management decisions here at Goodwill around being closed, until the middle of July or the beginning of August, and then of course we reopened up, immediately in the first half in the first half of May, and the results are all around us as a result. So, given that we blew it, we kind of blew our chance to suppress the virus. I don't know if I was a parent. My son, as you know, is 18, and I don't have any kids younger than that. I was a parent with young kids, and the choice of sending them to school. I don't know what I'd do. I don't know what to do. And boy, and it's so hard because, like, a lot of it depends. If you weren't going to send your kids to school, what would you do with them? Some people will have options, some people won't.
I know people that are big.
Is it okay for me to punt? Are you going to let me punt on that question? Or are you going to force me to answer?
No, you don't necessarily have to answer. I do have some thoughts.
It's tough. Yeah.
And I don't want to pretend like I would know exactly because I don't have kids, but I think I can pretend what I would think I would do. And if you just look at the data, the flu comparison really gets, the pro-lockdown people riled up. And I would say that COVID is not comparable to the flu if you're older and more vulnerable, right? But if you're, let's just say, under 50 and under, 60 and under, healthy, especially real young, under 20, under 30, it is very comparable to the flu. And there's actually been studies that have said, in that age, the flu is actually more deadly than COVID. Like, COVID's just not, really, negatively affecting children. Now there's possibility that they could spread it, which that's something there's still uncertainty about. I mean, that's the whole thing with this virus. Like, there's still uncertainties. Like, are there different strains?
They're finding some stuff that they think that kids under the age of 10 may not even transmit it very much, but teenagers transmit it like crazy, right? So there's so much we don't know.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty.
I'm glad you said the date stamp, by the way, because July 21st. Somebody, if they listen to this like a month or two from now, they'll be like, listen to those people talking about that ridiculous stuff because the science is going to advance. So anyway, I'm glad you said the date.
Yeah, the science will definitely advance, and that's where there's so much uncertainty too. Is like I've been like reading different studies, and it's like, are there different strains in different parts of the world? Like I've heard a theory that in the U.S. now, and the data's kind of backing it up, that we have a more contagious, less deadly version of the strain in the U.S. right now, which the data is really supporting that. There's a crazy amount of cases in states like Florida, California, Texas, and the death rate is stayed relatively low percentage. So I guess the question for you, and I guess the question could come back to me too, is the estimates that I've seen, the most accurate estimates are somewhere between a 99.5 to probably a 99.8% survival rate of COVID for people that contract it. And it's just like, at what percentage? Because that's obviously, and that doesn't include the people that get sick. I don't know like the hospitalization rate off the top of my head, but I even know that's going down heavily. Maybe because of the virus strain is weaker, maybe a combination in that, and it's just a bunch of younger people getting it now. But like, at what percentage would people feel comfortable? Because I guess it's just not that far off. Because it's interesting, and it can go back my way too. If it was like a 97% survival rate, I may be like for the lockdowns. But so I guess, is it 99.9% survival rate where like you would feel comfortable that the country should just open up? Is it, what does that look like? Because I don't feel like, I think that's what gets a lot of people worked up too, especially online, is that we thought it was going to be the plague. We thought it was going to be the Spanish flu. It's definitely a very contagious virus, but it's not a very deadly virus. Just that the data will show that. And obviously even 99.9, if it infects way more people than the flu, that's going to kill more people than the flu. So it's slightly deadlier than the flu and X percentage more contagious. I guess at what point would we just feel comfortable just opening everything back up? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not that far off on a percentage standpoint. A slightly lower hospitalization rate and a slightly higher survival rate is what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah. So, and I think what I was thinking when you were first starting, was that I would bring in more variables into this rather than just, rather than simply the death rate. Right, and I hear you doing that too. It's like it's hospitalization rate. It's how many people, who become sick but don't die but are left with permanent injuries. The one person I know, who came down with it and had a case of it. It was the worst. She said it was the worst 3 weeks of her life, and there were two periods during that three weeks when she thought she was going to die. Right, She may have, permanent health consequences as a result. And she was classified as a mild case because she never got hospitalized. So, there's other variables than just the death rate on it. So, boy, I don't want to just punt on all of your questions here.
No, I'm just.
I think that the right thing that we should have done, and we should still consider doing it, is stopping the transmission of the virus. There's things about this virus that we just don't fully understand right now either, right? The flu is a respiratory illness. COVID is a respiratory illness, but it also has indications of being a nerve illness and also being a vascular illness. It's causing strokes in people, and we simply don't know the long-term impacts. That's why another thing when you talk about vulnerable and non-vulnerable populations. So, the only thing we know. The only way we can classify some people, like young people your age and maybe a little younger, as non-vulnerable is because we don't understand the long-term impacts of this thing. It may end up that there aren't any long-term impacts on young people, but we simply don't know. There's some young people are showing damages to their heart and all that. Is this going to be a significant issue? We just don't know. The safe and responsible thing is to stop the transmission of the virus.
Yeah. I don't disagree with stopping the transmission, or at least minimalizing with things like what Sweden did.
With the cow being out of the barn now, what do we do? I run out of answers now because we've made it a bigger deal than it should have been.
Yeah. So I think I would send my kid to school to end it. And I guess if there's a virus in the future, is that just going to be, I would say we're all going to be more prepared across the board, right? But talk about the term privilege, it's a very popular word in 2020. Is every time there's a virus, people just going to, something I didn't touch on in my reasoning as well is, and some people think my, herd immunity strategy is selfish and inconsiderate. And I actually view it as I think it's selfish and inconsiderate how we're let's stay home, let's stop the spread, let's only have essential workers work, which, by the way, are typically low income.
There's a justice issue there too, right?
Let's have the federal government fund, trillions of dollars. And I looked because I know you mentioned Germany in our last conversation. It was about a few $100 billion in spending for them. So, and I think about $500 billion in tax deferrals, which that's a whole nother thing that's gonna be interesting with the U.S. this year is, who doesn't pay their taxes. So, proportionally to the population, there are some similarities with numbers there. I think a lot of the European countries just paid people directly, which, by the way, again, I'm not even saying I'm super for that, but if they're gonna do it, probably pay people directly. That probably would have been the better solution, I would say, and we probably agree on that.
Using private sector business as a middleman to get transfer payments to people. That was a huge source of stress throughout March and April, by the way, because Congress was deliberating on the CARES Act and the FFCRA and those things, and all of those bills changed the employer-employee relationship because they basically wanted to use private business as a middleman between the government and the people that they wanted to get transfer payments to. And the rules they were putting in place were very, very difficult to follow. That was stressful. And what I was telling my friends who run other Goodwills, I'm like, if they want to give folks money, just give them money. Keep me out of it.
Yeah, and again, hindsight's 2020, but looking back, I just think paying people directly because we do 100% agree on this. Now that we're in the middle, we got the worst of both worlds. I mean, Who knows what's going to happen to the housing market and stuff over the next few months. I mean, it's pretty scary and sad to think about. So, but yeah, and I guess, is that going to be just our expectation moving forward is anytime there's a virus, we do our best to prevent it from getting into the country, but assuming we're not perfect and it's something like this is going to happen again, is just locking everything down and expecting the federal government to pay for stuff until we figure out a vaccine? Is that like just what's going to be the norm moving forward? Because that's kind of scary to me too, like as a society. I'm not a fan of that route.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen again. I think I think there's a heightened awareness to the need to have pandemic preparation in place now. And so, if this happens again in the next, generation, I think that the response, the international response and the national response, was going to be very different. But I totally agree with you. The way we have, funded the response that we chose and the way we funded it hasn't been great. I'm glad we got stuff to people. There's a lot of low income people that work for Goodwill. When we had to furlough them, we've tried to bring all of them back, of course, but we had to furlough them for a while, and we tried to coordinate the actions we were taking with the actions that the public sector was taking, so that our employees wouldn't lose any money. And we were actually able to do that. We actually kind of threaded the needle and got it just right. We were able to maintain everybody's. Nobody lost their health benefits, and nobody lost any income as a result of doing this. But it was tough. The right thing to do is to respond. To use the protocols of public health and prevent the crisis reaching this scale in the first place. Yeah, but I don't want to totally dodge your question. If it gets to this, if this happens again, should the response just be a great big huge federal bailout again? Do we have a choice?
That's a good question. I think.
Are you just going to have everybody get evicted? Are you going to have every business in the United States to declare bankruptcy simultaneously?
Well, I think that would only happen if I think what I will say too is if we knew the mortality rate of because when it first came here, the virus, like, I think it was WHO projected a 3% mortality rate, right? Like that was really early on. So like that was and there was only a small time, because I've been pretty firm on my stance for quite a while. We've been talking about this for a while, but they're at a 3% mortality rate. I was like, okay, maybe we should lock some stuff down here. But I think the whole strategy would have been different from the get-go too if we just knew more of what it was. Like I think if we just had a similar to a Sweden, where it was isolate and trace,
do the public health stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that may have been the country's primary focus, but I think at first we're just like, it's
no one had any idea what this thing was.
Yeah, right? no one knew. So final question, COVID related, then we can transition to Goodwill, because I know we got some good stuff there to discuss, no pun intended. But you're in charge right now. What do you do to solve the current situation, just based on, you're very humble, but you're a very well-read guy. I feel like I learned something from you in all of our conversations. You know a lot about world politics and U.S. politics, so I am curious to your opinion on that.
So the first thing I would do is hire a lot of contact tracers, right? It would immediately begin ramping up the testing protocols. So testing got better for a while, but it's getting now I think even here at Goodwill, when we're having to send employees for tests when somebody in their life gets the virus we send them, it's taking 7 to 10 days to get the test back. So massive investment in testing. I would have a national testing strategy. Would have a national contact tracing strategy. It would be working. And that, when you have a national strategy, it doesn't mean that you're telling the states what to do. You're just making sure they have the resources to fully implement their own plans, and you're coordinating amongst the states. So I would do that, and where there are significant outbreaks in localities, because every outbreak is local, right? What's happening in Houston, is not what's happening in Lubbock. And would work with those local communities to support them in slowing down the rate of transmission, so there were fewer people to contact trace. But I would go and make the best of it and slow down the rate of transmission as much as possible. while we wait for a vaccine.
Here's a very controversial question. Would you make a national mask mandate?
I don't even know if the federal government has the authority to impose a national mask mandate.
Yeah.
But I would certainly, if I had the bully pulpit, I would be encouraging, all of the states and all of the localities to require people to wear masks. I do not think that the federal government has the authority to issue a national mask mandate, but you certainly you have the bully pulpit and say, this is the best way to keep safe if you're going to be out, mingling with people. So, I would certainly use every bit of authority that I had to encourage people to wear masks and encourage people at the state and local level to require it.
Yeah. Well,
did that sound pretty political?
It was a very political answer. When I just so people know, when I talked to Ed before our recording, I was like, are there any topics we should avoid? And because as a CEO of Goodwill, he has to do his best to straddle that line. So I'm trying to be my best to be respectful of that. Also, watch my language. I don't know if you've noticed, I've just been really respectful because I don't know if the team's going to watch it or what. So
we are definitely both on our best behavior.
We are.
Yep.
Well, cool, man. Well, yeah, enjoyed that convo. We're going to see what's going to happen over the, next few weeks, next few months. Yeah. So I know I want to talk about Goodwill. Can we talk a little bit about, before going into Goodwill specifically, can we talk about your background specifically and
Sure.
how you eventually made it to be involved with the Goodwill organization?
Sure. Want me to go?
Oh yeah, just kick it off, man.
So I always, I've always really been animated by issues of social justice. It's all I've ever really wanted to do. Don't know where the notion first came, but I've just always had it. And so when I got out of school, looking to make my way in the world, I ended up, working in the nonprofit sector on issues of, first I was social justice, and now I really work on issues of, economic inclusion and helping people achieve their own goals. And early in my career in the nonprofit sector, I noticed even though we were nonprofits and we weren't businesses, so to say, we weren't for-profit businesses, I noticed that the people who got the most work done were the people who really knew how to run a business. And so I started hanging out with those folks because I didn't know anything about how to run a business. I had a degree in philosophy and a master's degree in journalism, and I had never taken an accounting class, which I wish I would have. But I noticed that the people who were the most effective, in their leadership roles were the people who really knew how to run a good business. They knew how to manage the dollars and cents. They knew how to measure what they were trying to accomplish. They had really clear goals. And so I started hanging out with those folks. And I think it was kind of inevitable that I would end up with Goodwill, because Goodwill is the original, the biggest, and the best social enterprise there is. Goodwill uses the tools of private enterprise to achieve a social outcome. We try to help low income people, be successful through work, right? So we run this big business, and all the benefit, that we generate from running a business, just like any other private enterprise, we invest, all of the returns of that business, into the community and into the people that work for us. So it meets my, needs to be working on social justice, and also, you get the satisfactions of, running a successful private enterprise, because it's a lot of fun to run a business, which is something I never would have guessed I would have said when I was 25.
Business is a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I know. I never would have thought I was 25. My dad was so happy when I turned into a nonprofit business.
And this is a good segue into one of the topics I wanted to bring up regarding Goodwill and the business component of it. And I 1,000% agree. And when I tell people that I'm involved with Goodwill, something they say often, I mentioned earlier, is probably like 1 out of 4. Seriously, like even somebody else texting a few days ago, they mentioned it. For some reason, people think Goodwill's executives are overpaid, which, if anything, and I can tell you because I know what everybody's paid on at least Central Florida, level, if anything, they're drastically underpaid proportionally to the size of the business and the roles that they're involved in. How do we explain to more people and that you need talent on your organization to run a successful nonprofit? Like nonprofits, I think, a guy like you who's the CEO of a company, Goodwill, and we can talk about the structure of Goodwill in a second too, and like how there's broken up into regions, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of that either. But like you're, based on the size of the organization, I would say you're pretty underpaid. Just seriously, for the size. I mean, size of the organization. I know guys that run organizations and, as a CEO, and their comp is considerably higher. How do we explain to people that not only are people not like overpaid in most cases, it's actually a good thing to pay premium compensation because you can attract talent to, and again, maybe at some of a discount. Everybody loves the mission of Goodwill at the executive level that I've met, and they're all taking a discount to be involved. So some discount is 100% reasonable, and I support that. But how do we just switch the narrative where it's like, hey, if nonprofits need talent, because that's how they're going to run most effectively?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, that's it. You have to. You have to pay enough to bring the people in to manage the responsibilities that the business has, right? And as Goodwill, as I mentioned earlier, we're a private enterprise. We have 30 stores, a bunch of donation locations. We have a fleet of trucks, and we have very sophisticated systems in place to make sure that all of those things work the way they're supposed to work. And that we generate the revenue that we need to keep everybody paid, to keep everybody safe, to make sure that we're providing a good work environment with properly trained supervisors. We have 1,200 employees, so it's a big enterprise that requires a lot of sophisticated systems to make it work. And you have to have people in place that know how to develop those systems and to use them to keep people safe. And so you have to pay a competitive wage, or you won't have the people you need to run the business and achieve your goals.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree, and I think as a society, we have to do a better job of understanding that. We can't hate certain corporations for not paying enough, and then also hate corporations for paying too much, when in all actuality, they're paying at a hefty discount for the size role, because you have to run Goodwill just like any other private company.
We don't have tax revenue. We make all of our revenue at the cash registers. There's benefits though too. We also have a tax exemption, right?
Yeah.
So that helps, and that tax exemption means that we have a responsibility to the community to be completely transparent in everything we do, which includes the way that we pay people. And so, sure, we have to attract the right kind of people to do the work, and you have to pay people enough to get them to do the work. But at the same time, you also have to be justified where you're paying people to the community.
Yeah.
So it is a privilege to be in these jobs. It is enormously gratifying to make a living by taking stuff that would have ended up in the landfill and turning that into jobs and opportunity for people. That's just something that feels good all day long, to do. And what we owe to the public for the privilege of being able to do it is just complete transparency. We have to be able to justify to the community how we use our money. Why do we make the stores look the way that we do? Why do we pay the executives the amount that we pay them? I think it's correct for the community to have us explain those things to them.
Yeah. I hear an echo, by the way, on your end. I don't know. There we go. We're good now.
Good.
By the way, for people that are listening, I do plan on doing more of these in person, but for now, because of the climate, it's going to be more online. So I'm looking forward to doing one in person with you one day too. Yeah. Another false assumption that I get, it's not quite as much as the executives are just like, I would say so many people have been like, the CEOs are making millions of dollars a year, and I'm just like, okay,
Yeah, we're not making millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, they're not. So, but another false assumption, and just something that's said to me often, and I think it can help people that do donate clothes to Goodwill, or considering donate other things to Goodwill or whatever, is that you just have crazy high margins because people are donating. Can you walk through the process and like the labor and the team members that are involved just when somebody like donates that t-shirt or donates that pair of shoes to like how it gets to the retail floor?
Sure. Yeah, we don't have a cost of goods sold, right? Like other retailers do. If you're working at Target, right? They had to pay the cost of their inventory as their cost of goods sold, and we don't have that, but we do have a cost of collections, right? We have to solicit these donations. We have to receive them. We have to transport them. We have to determine what we can sell and what we don't sell. And then of the items that we don't sell, we have to figure out what to do with them, right? And we don't just take them to the landfill. We have to find ways to salvage and recycle them. We run an enormous recycling operation. So when items get donated to us, let's say that somebody drives up to the donation location in Ocoee, for example. They make that donation. The donation attendant who is there, and we have to pay rent on that facility, and we have to pay the staff who work there. And we like paying staff, by the way, because our mission is to help people achieve their goals through work. So we like having a lot of people on the staff. They take the donation, they do an initial sort on it, right? Because some stuff is sellable and some stuff is not. Some stuff goes straight into recycling. And then, sometime tomorrow morning, a truck is going to show up, and we're going to transport that back to our main facility down on Taft-Vineland Road, just south of OBT and the Turnpike. That's going to go through the processing. It's going to get routed to the right store where it can sell. We're going to put that on the sales floor. Probably one of the most interesting things about Goodwill is that we have this huge material handling operation, because what a lot of people may not know is that only half of the items that are donated to us are sellable, right? Some of the clothes that come to us, they're torn, they're stained, whatever. We can't sell those. If we put them out on the shelves, no one would buy them. So only about half of the items that get donated to us are sellable, and only about half of the items that we put out on the shelves actually sell. So half of what is donated is sellable, half of what is sellable is sold. So about 25% of the stuff gets sold in the stores, and the other 75% gets run through this really big recycling operation. We send very little stuff, we send very few items to the landfill. We sell it in the stores, or we sell it into salvage markets, and it all gets recycled and salvaged. So it's this big operation of running the stores and then running this salvaging operation to keep it out of the landfill. That takes a lot of labor. The best way to show how we're different from other retailers, if you go to your average Best Buy or your Walmart or your Target, they spend about 8 to 10% of their revenue goes to labor, where with Goodwill, it's 60%. So all that, collecting the donations, processing them for sale, recycling the stuff that we can't sell, all of that stuff requires an enormous amount of labor, which again is our mission, so we like it, right? But we have about 60% of our revenue is devoted to labor. They only have about 10% of their labor, of their revenue to labor, and that's the big difference between how we operate our business, and then the big difference in the purpose of our businesses is that our businesses run for the benefit of the employees, and their businesses run for the benefit of their shareholders.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Can you talk about, I know one thing that's important to you in particular was doing your very best to increase employee compensation while you're there. Can you talk about maybe that and just some of the other initiatives that you personally have with the organization?
Yeah, that's I really believe that the single best thing we can do for our employees is to pay them more. And that's my goal. When we first met, I had that conversation with you the very first time we met. And that's what I told the search committee when they were looking for someone to fill this job. And what I know from my experience, what I did in California when I was running Goodwill Central Coast, which runs from Santa Cruz to San Luis Obispo, on the central coast of California, is that by investing in both the employees and investing in the business, so in terms of the right kinds of facilities, the right equipment, that you can enormously improve productivity. And when you improve productivity, you generate more revenue. And because we're Goodwill and we run this business for the benefit of our employees, we gave all the money to them. So in the last 4 years I was at the job in California, we increased the employees' pay by 50% and still ran a business that generated a margin that allowed us to invest into more productive resources in the company, improving our facilities. And that was all based on having the right trucks, the right loading docks, the right training, the right kind of supervisors. And the nice thing is we didn't have to go get new employees, right? We didn't go find new employees who were quote unquote more skilled and pay them 50% more. We increased the pay of the employees who were right there, because what we found was that when we gave the employees better tools and better work environments, they were more productive. So the thing that was holding them back in terms of their productivity and in terms of their ability to earn more money was the company. It was management in the company. And when we changed our goals and when we realized that we needed to increase productivity so we could pay people more, we didn't have to go find new employees. The employees we had were perfectly capable of working at a higher level. It was enormously satisfying work. In the plan that's due to the exact same thing here.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And we're fortunate as an organization where, none of our team members are, I would consider low wage. But
this is your company, right? Your marketing.
Yeah, my marketing company. Yeah. And it's nice to know, and I can completely understand and support where you're coming from. Like, I know, and we're not a giant company right now. We have online businesses, Ed, we just run super lean. We have contractors all over the place. We have about 10 full-time right now, so we're not giant. I had my manufacturing company back in my early and mid-20s, and it was like the most capital-intensive business, and I've just I have to build up an appetite to start building a team again and investing in stuff like that. But it is nice to know that
taking on bigger commitments when you're investing other people's money into that capital purchase, right?
Yeah, it's nice for me to know that all the wages we're paying are, I'm not saying we're just paying like these astronomical wages, but they're solid wages. So I think that's great that you and Goodwill are looking to increase wages. I know there's a lot of hardworking people there. And
they all deserve more money.
Yeah.
Right. They all do. They and that's the goal. Improve the productivity of the business and give all the benefit to them.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing we left out when talking about executive compensation is me as a board member, just so people know, it's 100% volunteer based. So,
that's right. Yeah, we're a number. One misconception that people have is a lot of people think that we're a for-profit business, right?
Yeah.
And we're just not. We're a 501c3 registered charity. We are a nonprofit. We are owned by the community. Our assets are held in trust, for the community by the board of directors, and all the board of directors by law are required to be volunteers like Jeremy. Yeah,
you guys did provide a really good barbecue lunch one day, though. It was great. It made the whole experience, better. What's something that you feel, one thing or could be multiple things, that something awesome that Goodwill does that a lot of people don't know about?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is just the amount of stuff that we recycle. The volume that we deal. Well, I'll do two things. One is the volume that we deal in is enormous, right? And this Goodwill, prior to my arrival, has done a good job of scaling up, to handle the volume of materials that the community wants to put to use and not send to the landfill. So whenever people go down to what we call the hub, it's our big material handling facility, on OPT just south of the Turnpike. It's 100,000 square feet, with 30 dock doors, and it's full of stuff, and we got that stuff moving. And people, when people see that, they're like, I had no idea. Then another cool thing is our e-commerce program, right? We train all the people who handle the donations, to look for special items, whether it's old baseball trading cards or Legos or designer clothes or special collectibles. We look for those things and we send them down to that facility. We have a whole e-commerce facility. We sell that stuff, on shopgoodwill.com, and we sell it also on goodfinds.com. So you can find some of the special treasures that people donate to us, and we sell those things online. I love that program because it creates special kinds of jobs. It's different jobs, different kinds of jobs that we have in the stores, and the jobs are uniquely. They have a unique ability to employ people with disabilities in those jobs. Just the nature of the work, photography, packaging, fulfillment, the listing stuff. They're great jobs for people who have disabilities. They come work for us for a while. They improve their job skills, and then we transition them out and we help them find other jobs in the community where they make even more money. Then we bring in somebody else.
Yeah, that part of it was pretty interesting to me when I first got involved, is that Goodwill, and it's kind of a catch-22 as an organization, but a lot of people use the Goodwill organization as kind of a launching pad into something else, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. A lot of people make careers here, but a lot of people, they have goals to do, jobs that are beyond what Goodwill's able to do. So they come in, they develop a resume, a good work history. You'll learn some skills, and they can learn management skills. They can learn transportation skills. We have several career ladders inside of Goodwill, and then they move on, and they pick up their careers, and then they accomplish their goals, in their next job.
Yeah. As an organization, you want to train and empower people, even though deep down, the more you train and empower them, the more likely they are to leave, right? But we talked about that before, was that if that's your company's mission, and which you want to just help people regardless if they stay with the organization or not.
I think it's the right thing for every company to do, by the way. I mean,
I agree for the most part.
Goodwill has a special obligation to do it, right? Because it is in our mission to help people achieve their own goals. And if people have worked up through one career ladder and they're up to store manager at Goodwill, and they're making good money, but they want to move on, they want to move into higher levels of management. We don't have an opening. We'll be thrilled to help to transition into another job in the community. But and I know this is the way you look at things too, Jeremy. This is the way private sector business should work too. You want to help people accomplish their own goals, because if they transition out of your company, they just become part of your professional network, right?
Yeah.
And they'll always remember you as the person who helped them build their career. And more good things will come your way as a result.
I 100% agree, especially as larger corporations, when they, very possible they're going to be consumers or family members are consumers. They'll just have that sense of loyalty.
They're going to refer customers to you. They're going to refer, when they know the next talented person, when you have a job open, they're going to refer talented people to you to take that job. It just makes the pie bigger for everybody to do it that way.
I agree. How did COVID affect Goodwill? I know we talked about some numbers our last conversation we had, but their revenues are still down a bit on the retail side because of COVID, right? Where do you see the business over the remainder of the year because of the economic climate?
Yeah, it had an enormous impact on us, right? Enormous impact on us. 97% of our revenue comes from the stores. So when the stores were closed, that means that our revenue went down by about 97%, which is pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've had some good leadership here, in the past, and so we had the resources to go into hibernation for a while. Also, because of some really talented people in human resources and our operations management, we were able to structure the way we took the business into hibernation in a way that didn't cost our employees any money, which was really great. And quickly people wonder, how did you do that? Well, we timed it with the government stimulus payments, and also when they became eligible for the enhanced unemployment insurance payments. But it had just a huge impact. One, I mean, it's not fun to close down 30 stores, with your whole operation. It's something I never in my career, thought I would have to do, and it was stressful and disruptive on everybody's lives. 1,230 people worked for us on February 29th, right? And it impacted every single person's life. And now that we're reopened, everybody who was working for us, wasn't invited back. Some, most came back, but not all for various reasons. And business is about 80% of last year, a little higher, which we were between 80 and 85% of last year. We've really tightened belts. Our management staff now is about half the size of what it was before. The stores are operating on about 80% of the previous labor that they had. But we're finding ways to make it work. People are resilient.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier in the economy is like, companies are starting to reopen, but so many of them are reopening with a leaner staff.
Way leaner.
How do you envision like this changing, like how you operate Goodwill moving forward? I mean, like, are you going to be more conservative with cash? I mean, just because something like this, obviously we know it could happen again. Like, is any like management style going to change because of that?
I think so. And you'll be involved in these conversations at the board level, right? We always
if you'll have me, Ed, if I'm still on the board, then. But yeah.
We always thought, to get kind of wonky on the business side of things, right? In the past, we always thought that, having between 30 and 60 days of cash was adequate, right? So if, I won't get into the definitions on that, but we always thought that having 30 to 60 days of cash was really flush and was more than enough. And now we know that, boy, things can happen in the world where you need to have a bigger cushion than that. So I think that we will set new financial ratios and new standards. It certainly changed the way we approach safety. I mean, you asked earlier how it changes the way we manage the business. The focus on safety, and new safety concerns, those things are certainly in place right now. We have, physical distancing rules, all kinds of new, personal protective equipment, all kinds of new cleaning protocols, all kinds of new reporting protocols when people get impacted by the virus. I mean, we did something. It was right before I went to California, the day before I went to California. We did a tabletop simulation on what happened if we really had big outbreaks, in Central Florida. How would we keep our shoppers safe? How would we keep our employees safe? Exactly what protocols would we use? What forms would we fill out? How would we support our employees as they tested positive for the virus? We did a huge tabletop simulation to see, what plans did we have in place that would work? What plans did we have in place that we would have to train hundreds of people how to implement? And what plans, when do we get stumped? It's like, I'm not sure what we'd do if that happened, right? Okay, in which case we need to go out and develop more plans. So, it's affected business to be sure.
Do you project revenues are going to be back to, what we were thinking they were going to be like by this time next year? I mean, you obviously can't predict the future, but I mean, just the way like numbers are heading right now, I mean, do you think it's going to get back to a level of normality there?
I will tell you next Thursday. And the reason I say next Thursday, that's our next board meeting. And one thing we're trying to do, that the team is working on right now is exactly that question: is what are our budget assumptions for 2021, right?
Yeah.
And we're wrestling with that question right now. My hunch is that we'll be using 2019 as a baseline. So using 1 year ago as a baseline, I do not think we'll be projecting baseline revenues for 2021. I think it's going to take more than a year to get back to where we were from a revenue standpoint.
I think it's funny how in the email invites for the board meetings now, since they're via Zoom, you put no lunch.
Yeah, lunch on your own.
Yeah, that would be awesome though if we just had individually catered lunches. It would be horrible. That's what people think Goodwill does, I think, is spend money like that.
Remember that part where I said we have to tell everybody in the community what we do with transparency?
Yeah, we each have our own individual servers that deliver and lunch virtually, and just wait until we're done and then clean it up.
So to say, I'm uncomfortable even joking about this, Jeremy.
Yeah. It's a joke. Goodwill, very, very fiscally responsible. I know. I'm just being funny. What would be interesting, and it's like in down economies, certain sectors always do well. Like I know in like 2008, just one example, auto mechanics did really well because people weren't buying as many new cars for many reasons. So what would be interesting is if revenues actually increase because of people losing their jobs and they just don't have the budget to maybe buy the nicer clothes they used to buy, or whatever the case may be.
We'll get new shoppers. We'll get new shoppers for sure, right? But Goodwill has a unique demand component in our business, right? So Goodwill is a supply-driven business. Our revenue model is, and our supply is donations, right? So as long as all the donations keep coming in, we'll have merchandise to put into the stores so that these new shoppers can buy it, right? Yeah. So our ability to satisfy these new shoppers is all based on the number of donations that we get. So we are a supply-driven business, not a demand-driven business. So hopefully donations stay strong, and then we would be able to capitalize on all these new shoppers coming in, generate more revenue, and increase the pay of our employees more quickly. But it's what we're having trouble predicting right now is what the impact of this new economy, this changed economy, is going to have on our donors.
Yeah.
We can predict what it's going to have on our shoppers. We're going to get more shoppers. The question is, are we going to have more stuff to sell?
What percentage of people do you feel take advantage of, like, when you donate a bunch of stuff, you get a tax write-off for that? So, like, my partner Max, he bought a new house, he's moving. He said
love that. We always get a lot of donations when people do that.
Yeah, and he's like is donating all this stuff, and I was like, don't forget to take advantage of that from a tax incentive. Like, is that common for people to take advantage of that, especially if they're donating, say, $500 or $1,000 plus worth of stuff? Is that something people are aware of and take advantage of as much as you think they should? Because I think that could increase, especially like higher end donations.
Yeah, and so most people take a receipt when we offer it to them, right? So I think that there is awareness that these things are tax deductible. I think there's awareness, but it is one of these things where, like, we should always be promoting that just to make sure that people know, because you can, and actually there's, if you use TurboTax, when it gets to the section on TurboTax, when did you donate used items to charity, there's actually, you can open up in there and it walks you through how to place a value onto the items that you donated, and you can really see that, because, we sell used t-shirts for $4 and pairs of pants for $6, it adds up pretty quickly. And so people will be surprised with how generous they really are being with us, and the value that donation can generate. And I love the fact that TurboTax, has something in the software that assigns value to each item you donated. If you donated a book, it asks you a book and assigns you like a value of $2.99 for each book. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I keep hearing my echo there. I don't know if that's... Do you mind turning the audio down slightly on your end? Just a smidget. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Technical. We've done pretty good this episode. We haven't. It's not like that Rogan Schiff episode where they're just talking over each other. So we've had a couple little difficulties in working out the kinks, but overall pretty good. One final thought on Goodwill that I thought was interesting as well is that they get a lot of business around Halloween time, and that's been something that Goodwill, especially in the Central Florida community, is the revenues really spike around Halloween. And I know we had a board meeting where we talked about does it make sense to create little pop-up shops and just different unique ways to take advantage of that. I mean, is October like the busiest month for Goodwill because of that typically?
Well, in Goodwill, Halloween is our Christmas.
Yeah.
To be sure. Yeah, we do it. Halloween is easily, our biggest month. And, we'll see the impact that physical distancing has on people being able to, have their Halloween parties. And if people are showing up to Goodwill to buy their costumes. And by the way, my advice is that everyone absolutely should still get a Halloween costume, and they should come get it, from Goodwill.
Well, again, if you look at the science and the data, the people that typically would be trick-or-treating are at very low risk of anything with COVID. So, if their grandma's taking them, maybe not as much, but, kids may still be good to go. Well, cool, man. I'll just ask you, is there anything else you wanted to share Goodwill related before we wrap up the chat here? Anything that you think people should know, or in regards to the plans or the mission, or just anything?
Yeah, it's every good thing that Goodwill has starts off as a donation of household goods. I just want people to know that that we take that stewardship of those donated goods really seriously. We are putting in plans in place to, continue to improve the quality of the employment that we generate, to make sure that our mission of helping people build lives that work is really present. This is sounding very corporate, very spiely, right? But we are a nonprofit organization, and every good thing we have comes from the donations that people give to us. There's no better company in the world at taking something that you don't want anymore and creating something good for your neighbor.
100%. And it does sound very corporate-y, but I can tell you, and people that know me and people that are, will get to know me, know that I'm very authentic. I'm always very honest and blunt. And I can just tell you, as being a board member, I think it's been like 3 years now. It's been quite a while. Am I still the youngest board member, by the way? Castro is like a couple years older than me.
Oh, that's right. We have Castro. Yeah, but you guys are close.
Yeah.
We have good diversity in that way on the board.
Yeah. I can just tell you, the executive staff in particular, and just the team members I've met over the years are, all rock solid people. They really do care about the community, and that's why I'm happy to be a part of it. So, thanks for your time, man. For listeners, hope you enjoyed it, and donate more stuff.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. Make sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Additionally, if you'd like to connect with Jeremy, follow him on Instagram at Mr. Jeremy C. Adams.